Coming in at number 5, we've got the Magalin Monster. If you've ever taken a drive up the 87, you might have come across a set of very colorful, very large footprints tracked across the highway. While these particular prints were put there by people, they are in homage to the Magalin Monster, aka Arizona's answer to Bigfoot. This big beastie lives along the Magalin Rim and has been seen from Prescott all the way to Clifton. Sightings of the monster date back to early as 1903, with plenty of reports of video, tracks, and hair samples appearing since. People claim that the Magalin Monster is a bipedal humanoid towering over most at 7 feet tall, leaving behind 22-inch footprints. Like most ape-like beasts in the woods, it has crazy strength and some wild eyes. Some claim it's covered in long black hair, others say it's reddish-brown. Maybe it changes with the seasons, or maybe there's more than one. The Magalin Monster is also known for smelling really, really bad. Like dead fish, skunk, BO, peat moss, and snapping turtle musk. I'd hide out in the woods if I smelled like that too. Part of the reason why it's so rarely sighted is that it tends to be active at night. It will hunt and gather all sorts of different foods under cover of darkness and make little nests for itself. If you stumble across one of these pine needle refuges, get the hell out of there. This beefy monster is known to be very territorial and very violent. It reportedly likes to decapitate deer and other wildlife before digging in, and if it can pull the dome off a deer, it can pop your top off like a bottle of Coke. Be careful if you hear any weird noises too, because the Magalin Monster likes to mimic other wildlife. Birds, coyotes, it is even reported to shriek like a woman in distress. So don't go running off to save the damsel, because you might find yourself face to face with a very hairy hunter. Tie up your supplies if you're camping too, as the monster will rummage through stuff left out.
You know, they were all about the hairy man or the wild man or something like that. And of course I didn't believe them.
This, says Wade, is a small baby Bigfoot trying to hide in the corner from his night vision camera.
Coming in at number 4, we've got El Chupacabra. Ah, the Southwest classic. Such a strange creature, the Chupacabra. Is it an alien? A demon dog? Something else? Also known as the goat sucker, these cryptids love to feed on livestock, attacking in the night. Farmers and other animal owners have often found these creatures totally hollowed out following particularly dark nights. Common features of the Chupacabra attacks are a complete lack of blood and puncture wounds in the neck and hindquarters. The wounds are always super clean, no signs of struggle or messiness. Sometimes there are weird injuries too. Cattle often have their anuses cored out, and somehow, even with these brutal injuries, no blood is found. Do the goat suckers inject some sort of sedative? Do they have magical powers? We may never know. One theory is that they have wings and descend on their prey and drain them before they have time to react. This would also explain the lack of tracks that accompany Chupacabra attacks. Although, if they were so quick and clever, wouldn't they also attack humans? Maybe our blood just doesn't taste as good. Now, this legend didn't start in Arizona, but now it's quite prevalent. El Chupacabra seems to have originated in Puerto Rico and made its way into Latin America, eventually spreading to the southwestern states. Now you'd be hard-pressed to find an Arizonan without some sort of Chupacabra story. Tucson resident Billy Nubian claims that he saw one attacking his goats late one night. He was startled awake by the panicked sounds of his goats bleeding. Running outside to investigate, he saw a huge rat-like creature pinning one of his goats. It then turned to face Billy, let out a blood-curdling scream, and ran off into the dark. Sarah A. has a similar story where she encountered a half-man, half-ape creature crouching frog-style in her yard. Freaky.
Coming in at number 3, the Alaska Triangle. The Alaska Triangle, oftentimes called Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, is a place in the untouched wilderness of the frontier state where a large number of people have gone missing. The triangle connects Anchorage, Juneau, and Barrow, with the latter being a small town on the state's north coast, and has some of North America's most unforgiving wilderness. Now, the triangle began attracting attention back in October 1972, when a small private plane carrying US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and aide Russell Brown, and Bush pilot Don Johns vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. Following the incident, more planes began to go down, as well as hikers going missing. Even Alaskan residents and tourists seemed to just vanish into thin air without any explanation. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, with a missing person rate at more than twice the national average, which is absolutely terrifying. Why aren't we talking about this? Now, the disappearances are often blamed on everything from severe weather to aliens to swirling energy vortexes to an evil shape-shifting demon of Tlingit Indian lore called Kushtaka. Absolutely insane, but I respect these theories. Honestly, it's probably just the weather, but you're cool. In at number 2, Saber Wolf. Legend has it that Inuits described a wolf-like evil spirit of the Nahanni Valley that kills people by biting their heads off. In some reports, the animal had long saber-toothed fangs fangs and weighed upwards of 600 pounds, all of which they would use to hunt and kill their prey. The so-called monster has been spotted in Alaska at least once by an American mechanic, who described it as a wolf on steroids, as well as the crew of an American TV show, Alaska Monsters, who claim to have an encounter with the beast. However, there may be an historical answer for the beast. Way back when, there was an animal called the direwolf that lived up until the most recent ice age. Thanks to research, science tells us that this wolf averaged about 100 to 150 pounds and was first thought to be predecessors to dogs as well as the grey wolf. The direwolf had bone-crushing jaws. However, archaeological evidence suggests it was a scavenger as well as a hunter. However, whether they still exist today, no one has a definitive answer, so perhaps it is a direwolf folks have been spotting, or maybe it is a saber wolf. What do you guys think though? Could just be a wolf. And finally, at number 1, the abandoned copper mine. This abandoned copper mining camp is a National Historic Landmark district that became a bustling mining camp filled with miners and their families. Now, in 1925, a geologist predicted that the area would soon be mined out, and he was correct, because by 1938 Kennecott was a ghost town, and as of today is a popular tourist attraction. Now, more interesting still, in the Kennecott mines, it was not gold that folks were digging for, but instead copper. After copper was discovered in 1900 in the area, a group of wealthy investors formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation to mine the incredibly rich copper before, of course, it was abandoned along with the railroad, which was eventually abandoned due to the cost of constantly changing its position across a nearby glacier, and the mining camp in turn became a ghost town. A very haunted ghost town at that. According to reports, the spectral phenomena in the area, which included tombstones appearing and then vanishing along hiking trails, sounds of crying children, and poltergeist activity, was enough to drive away state government workers who were trying to redevelop the area into government housing projects during the 1990s. Yikes. If you want to venture into the supernatural realm, you can, with the abandoned mine offering tours for those brave souls. Coming in at 5, Arkansas, the Dog Boy. Now, the name may sound ridiculous, yes, but the story is truly chilling. If you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of a small Arkansas town of Quintman, you may very well encounter the hulking outline of a 300-pound, half-man, half-beast with glowing animal eyes. This is the Dog Boy. If you see him, walk quickly, as he is rumoured to chase people down the street, biting at their heels, just like a dog. Now, this legend is rare, because the story behind the story may just be even creepier than the legend itself. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was reportedly a problem child, but not a cute one. No, this kid collected and tortured animals before turning his sociopathic focus to his parents, supposedly imprisoning them in their home and murdering his father. Bettis was eventually imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch, and would later die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Spooky stuff. Coming in at 4, Colorado, Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigator to their knees. Riverdale Road is notorious for having some of the most chilling and endless ghost stories, beginning with the fact that it is literally referred to as the gates to hell. Yeah, now the gates themselves are simply made of rusty iron, yet people travel from far and wide to visit them. This is because the man who built the gates lost his mind once they were finished. He then burned his entire mansion with his family asleep inside. Worse still, he was never caught or put on trial. As of now, people report that a lady in white walks the road close by the gates, with many assuming she is the man's wife, wandering, searching for her murdered children or even her husband. Another ghostly story goes that there are accidents that specifically happen to joggers all the time. Once upon a time, a jogger decided to take a jog along Riverdale Road and ultimately got hit. They sadly passed away, and rumor has it their spirit now haunts the road. People who walk the road are said to have heard a loud heartbeat and footsteps. If you drive by, you might also feel something hitting your car when there's literally nothing there. Now, there are so many more stories, but we'll end with the Native American shapeshifters. Now, what makes Riverdale Road interesting isn't just the road itself, but because the area of land that it cuts through is also rumored to be haunted. For hundreds of years, there have been countless stories about Native American shapeshifters roaming the land, with many passers-by spotting them on the road. According to reports, they take on different shapes and communicate with people in their own ways. They're also known to play tricks on anyone who walks down Riverdale Road, so be warned.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Skinwalkers. These Navajo legends have been cited all over, but have quite a reputation in Arizona. Medicine men possessed by spirits having to choose between good and evil. Often hermits being exiled from their communities. They take the forms of many animals and travel through the wastes. If driving through the arid desert at night wasn't unsettling enough, just wait until you hear about what skinwalkers like to do. Often they'll travel alongside lone vehicles in the dark, even when the car is hoofing it. They'll tap on the windows of the vehicle, trying to get the driver's attention. If the driver stops to see what's going on and gets out of their car, it's not likely that they're coming back. Yikes. There are some hot spots that locals try to avoid at night. Apparently there's a ranch that has been given the name Skinwalker Ranch thanks to the huge amounts of reports made, and San Carlos Reservation is also a place most will warn you away from during the night. Although most forests at night have their fair share of spooky denizens. There's one tale of a man camping alone that really makes you question whether a little adventure is worth it or not. He was hiking along with his dog and found an empty cave to set up camp in. As he unpacked his stuff, he noticed some unsettling cave paintings along the walls. Later that same night, he was woken up by his dog ferociously barking. As he sat up to see what was the matter, he saw a malformed creature slinking near the entrance of the cave. Acting quickly, he shot at it with his rifle, but this only stunned the creature. It called out to him, saying that it wanted to help. Sure. At this point, the man grabbed his dog and hightailed it out of there, leaving all his stuff. He hasn't gone back since. Hopefully he didn't leave anything too valuable behind, although he did escape with his dog and his life, which are valuable enough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Haunted Antique Mall. Back to Tucson for more terror and troubles, there's an old 2-story furniture store that was converted into an antique mall of sorts. You know the kind, set up like a flea market with all sorts of independent booths selling their wares. Well, one day customers were walking around upstairs looking at the assorted antiques, and they heard some clicking noises. One particularly curious antiquer decided to investigate and found the source. An old typewriter. The thing is, no one was around to operate it. The customers who had heard the typing were the only people upstairs. After that, more and more ghostly tales appeared. Furniture that was left neat and tidy at closing would be strewn throughout the aisles the next morning. Radios would increase in volume with no one around. Employees found themselves frozen in place from time to time, experiencing a distortion of time. They would be stuck there as customers passed by in fast or slow motion. Apparitions would appear all over, sometimes appearing as a grinning boy, other times as a mischievous-looking teenager. Nobody knows who these wraiths belong to. After hearing loud crashing noises upstairs but finding nothing displaced, the owners decided it was time to close down the upper level. Now, considering that all sorts of people were bringing in antiques from different sources, it is possible that all these ghosts came from haunted objects. Or it could be that the furniture store itself is haunted. Nobody's come up with concrete proof of the hauntings, but if you ever find yourself antiquing in Tucson, watch out for paranormal activity. And finally, at number 1, the ghosts of Slaughterhouse Canyon. I mean, the name of this canyon should be enough to give me to its bad news. Let me say it again. Slaughterhouse Canyon. Come on. The tale that accompanies the terrifying name comes from the gold rush back in the 1800s. A young family moved out to try their hand at striking it rich. However, this plan did not go very well. Soon they were hungry and destitute. The father would often head out for days, searching for food to sustain him and his family. Tragically, one day he never returned. Without the father to keep them fed, the family slowly starved. As their bodies wasted away, so too did their minds. Eventually, the mother couldn't take it anymore. Her children's cries were too much for her to bear. She donned her wedding dress and ritualistically killed her children. Carrying the corpses down to the nearby river, she wept and screamed. After she dropped their bodies into the water, she wandered around until succumbing to starvation soon after. This sad story forever marred the reputation of Slaughterhouse Canyon. Now, if you visit at night, you might be able to hear the pained cries of the murderous mad mother. Tragic and terrifying.
Number 5 on this list is the Falling Boy. This is a sad legend that's probably true. The Black Church is located in the Romanian city of Brasov and is a beautiful old Gothic church. It almost never made it to 2022 though, because several hundred years ago it had a horrible fire. The church did manage to survive and had a bunch of renovations done on it to spruce it up. It's around this period of time that people think the Falling Boy statue was erected. On one single pillar of the exterior of the church, there's a statue of a boy who looks to be falling over. Either that, or he's searching for something on the ground. It's difficult to say for sure. Either way, no one has any idea why this statue is here, and 3 legends have come out explaining it. Arena Webb writes, "Some say that he was the son of a priest and that he was naughty. As a punishment, his father sent him in the church's attic. But then the Great Fire started, and so the boy got trapped in there. The statue was built depicting him trying to escape the flames." Another legend, and a more popular one, is that the boy was helping with the construction of the church. At one point, his boss told him to check if the wall is straight. He leaned over the walls and he fell. His boss felt guilty and ordered a statue. Others, though, say it was murder. They say that this boy was so good working at the construction of the church that a fellow worker got envious. He sent the boy to check the walls and he pushed him. The boy died, but the man couldn't live with the guilt, so he confessed shortly after. The other builders decided to make the statue in the boy's memory. So those are the 3 legends about the boy, and sadly all of them result in the boy's death. Now it's thought that his spirit still lingers here at this church, and if you're lucky, you may even be able to spot him. Comment down below what you guys think about this legend and which of the 3 stories you believe the most. Curious to know what you guys got. Number 4 on this list is the Pied Piper. You've most likely heard the name and probably the story of the Pied Piper before. If you haven't, then let me read off a great passage from Andre Diamond describing the tale. The Pied Piper legend originated in Hamelin, Germany during the Middle Ages. As the story goes, the town was struggling with a rat infestation problem and was desperate for relief. A mysterious man in pied clothing approached the mayor and promised he could rid the city of its problem in return for payment of 1,000 guilders. The mayor agreed, and the man played a magical pipe to lure all the city's rats to a nearby body of water where they drowned. When the piper returned for his reward, the mayor refused. As if visualizing a rat infestation was not traumatizing enough, the story then takes another sinister turn. Furious that he had been cheated, the piper soon returned to the town of Hamelin on St. John's and Paul's Day. As the grown members of the town attend church, the piper once again played his magical pipe through the streets, this time luring the town's 130 children from their homes. Depending on the version of the story, he either led them to the lake or into a cave, and none were ever seen again. Most versions agree there were a few children left behind. One was crippled and he could not keep up, one was deaf so he could not hear the music, and one was blind and could not see where the other children were going. When church let out, the survivors told the townspeople what had happened, and the rest is history. Now you're probably thinking, okay Nick, well what the hell does this have to do with Romania? Well, there's another version of this legend that says this man took the into Vaghis Cave and then after a time slowly let them out. Vaghis Cave is in Transylvania, and it's believed by the locals that this Pied Piper still lives there. They also think that this is the true version of the legend because there's a very large population of German-speaking Saxons in that area. These people are thought to be the descendants of the children who were taken so many years ago. Even to this day though, everyone still fears Vaghis Cave and still fears the Piper.
Coming in at number 3, the Catacombs. The Catacombs of Paris are underground ossuaries which hold the remains of more than 6 million people in a small part of a tunnel network built to consolidate Paris' ancient stone quarries. Now, it was largely forgotten until it became a novelty place for concerts and various other private events in the early 19th century, as well as a hotspot for urban explorers. Now, as you would expect, there are a ton of legends surrounding this creepy burial site, so I'll be listing off a handful. Let's start with the ghost of Philbert S. Park. During the French Revolution, Philbert was a doorman at the Val de Grace Hotel. During a mission to fetch a liqueur from a cellar, Philbert wound up in the Paris catacombs instead, walking around in the darkness alone with just a single candle. He became lost and confused. His body was not found until 11 years later when a group of cataphiles uncovered it. His body is now buried in the catacombs in the exact spot that he was found. Legend now states that on each November 3rd, Philbert's ghost haunts the labyrinth of the catacombs. However, the most disturbing story hails from the 1990s when a group of cataphiles were walking through the catacombs and discovered a video camera on the ground. To their surprise, the camera held footage on it. While watching the footage, it became apparent that the man filming was lost and had no idea how to escape the winding tunnels. The video then ends abruptly with the man dropping the camera on the ground and running off into the unknown. He was never discovered. However, it was this legend that many believe As Above, So Below, the movie, was based off of. Coming in at number 2, we have the Phantom of the Opera. We're all familiar with the 1986 musical musical based on the book by Gaston Leroux with music by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Its central plot revolves around a beautiful soprano, Christine Daae, who becomes the obsession of a mysterious, disfigured musical genius living in the subterranean labyrinth beneath the Paris Opera House. But did you know this story is actually based on legend, with many Parisians being all too familiar with the story of the Phantom and the mysterious box number 5 at the Garnier Opera House. This legend began at the Music Conservatory on Rue Les Pelletiers, where it is said that a young pianist and a young ballerina fell in love. Planning to be wed, the pianist composed a piece of music to symbolize their love that was intended to be played at their wedding. However, that never happened because on October 28, 1873, a fire destroyed the conservatory and killed many, including the ballerina. The pianist survived but was forever scarred by the fires, particularly on his face. He abandoned the world and took refuge in the underground passage of the Garnier Opera House in order to escape the dreadful people who considered him a monster or a demon. He stayed there for the rest of his life, devoting himself to his music. Now, the pianist was never disturbed, but rumors quickly began to spiral, creating the legend of the Phantom of the Opera. The first rumors came from the opera house staff, such as stagehands and dancers. It is also purported that box number 5 at the Garnier Opera House is said to be haunted by the mysterious Phantom and should always be left vacant for him. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Notre Dame and the Devil's Door. Notre Dame is one of the most infamous places in French history, with it being a medieval Catholic cathedral that was consecrated to the Virgin Mary and is considered to be one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture. However, popular interest in the cathedral blossomed after the publication of Victor Hugo's novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame back in 1831. The cathedral is holy ground, but saying that how many tourists from around the world have been ushered in by Satan himself. Some history first though. When it comes to the construction of buildings such as this one, construction always starts at the back of the building with the entrances added last. So when it came time to add the famous door to the cathedral, a man by the name of Mr. Biscornet, a young metalsmith, convinced the church to hire him. The job lasted months, with Biscornet slaving away in his workshop. However, when he finally finished, it was of course a masterpiece and blew the minds of Parisians. However, were the doors perhaps too good to be true? This all took place during the 1300s, when magic was believed and myths spread fast. So when people saw the door for the first time, they believed that Biscornet couldn't possibly have crafted it himself, and that instead he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for the masterpiece. Stories quickly began to emerge of people claiming to have visited Biscornet during the creation and found him unconscious on the floor, with the project mysteriously completed. The rumors began to spread, with priests adding fuel to the fire by claiming that the door's locks refused to work until they were sprinkled with holy water. To top things off, not long after this, the artist died, with many speculating that in order to fulfill the contract, the devil had to claim Biscornet's soul.
Number 5 on this list is the legend of Walhalla Road. Walhalla Road is actually quite a beautiful road in central Ohio. It is very long, starting out as a suburb street and then eventually transitioning into a very skinny one-way road in the middle of what feels like nowhere. As you may expect, our legend takes place in the skinny, abandoned one-way section of this road. The story says that in the 1950s there was a couple that lived in a home along Walhalla Road out in the country. Now, no one is really sure what prompted the husband to do this, whether he had just gone insane or if the wife had done something that he did not approve of, but one evening he totally lost it. He grabbed the axe from the garage and brutally murdered his wife in the attic of their home. The whole story gives me some serious Jack Nicholson in The Shining type of vibes. After he had killed her, he took her body and he buried it at nighttime in the yard. Now, they weren't completely in the middle of nowhere and did have some neighbors in the area. After several weeks of not seeing the wife and strange explanations from the husband, the neighbors called the police and the truth was revealed. The man was then easily tried, convicted, and sentenced to execution. After his death, though, people started reporting seeing him around the area. When they reported this, nobody took it very seriously, considering it had been big news when he was sentenced to death and everybody had heard about it. More and more sightings came out though, and it was always the same story. They could see along the side of the road ghostly apparitions of the husband who was killing his wife. Almost as if the scene was getting played over and over and over again. The locals now swear that if you head down that road and get to the one-way, then it's very possible that you will see the ghost of our murderer replaying the killing of his wife. Number 4 on this list is the Lizardmen. Now this is certainly a strange one, but honestly it's one of the biggest urban legends that Ohio has to offer. The legend can be traced all the way back to 1955, where it was reported that a traveling salesman spotted these strange looking creatures. Now this story sounds a little bit ridiculous to me if I'm being completely honest, but apparently 3 lizard-like creatures that are roughly 3 feet tall were standing on their hind legs having a full-on conversation. When the man pulled up to them and couldn't believe his eyes, because it's literally these 3-foot lizards talking to each other, they whipped out a magic wand and then used their magic wand to conjure some sparks, which provided them with enough cover to then run away. Now frankly, that part of the story sounds a lot more like my traveling salesman buddy was dipping a little bit too deep into the drink, or potentially some other illegal substances. But some of the other encounters that people have reported having with these beings aren't quite as outlandish. In 1972, for instance, a police officer was driving his car by the Little Miami River and in his headlights saw a very large creature sprint across the road and leap off a bridge into the river. He was totally blown away and said that the being was nothing like he has ever seen, painting the picture of a unique lizard-like man when he described it. Throughout the years, there have been a lot more sightings of the lizard creatures by Little Miami River, similar to that of the police officer. Up to this point, there haven't been any deaths or harm that has befallen on the people that have come across this creature, or creatures, so it isn't necessarily too scary, but I had to include it on this list simply due to the amount of sightings that people have had and how popular of an urban legend it is to the Ohio locals.
Coming in at 3, New Jersey, The Watcher. Now, this legend could honestly be the script for a horror movie. Let me break it down for you. A family begin receiving ominous notes just days after they close on their dream home. Yeah, spooky, right? Well, this story took off back in 2015 after a young family moved into a $1 million house in Westfield, New Jersey. However, they began to get letters signed by someone only IDing themselves as The Watcher, who claimed it was their duty to watch over the house, while also spouting weird lines such as, I quote, "Do need to fill the house with the young blood I requested," and "Who has the bedrooms facing the street?" Yeah, creepy. The writer also noted the make of the couple's car and the comings and goings of construction crews. He also observed that the couple had 3 young children, stating, I quote, "Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Now, no one quite knows the truth behind the legend, whether it was a prank or a spooky neighbor, but what we do know is that the Watcher was never caught and still remains watching the house in Westfield, New Jersey. Coming in at number 2, California, Turnbull Canyon. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop trail located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. It lies in the northern central part of the preserve and is an east-west canyon with relatively steep drainage. Now, natives call Turnbull Canyon Hatunga, or the place of the devil, and is supposedly where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk along the canyon. According to other reports, Turnbull Canyon also houses the ghosts of 21 children who perished in a plane crash back in 1952. However, there are no existing records of the incident, so this may be local legend. However, what we do know is real is that in the canyon lies the remains of an old insane asylum that supposedly came back to life to kill a teen in the 1960s via long dormant electrical wire. Not only that, but there are cults, alien encounters, and gravity hills. The list goes on and on. Basically, if something unnerves you, there is probably a story about it going down at Turnbull Canyon. Now, its origin is pretty simple. Turnbull's evil dates back centuries. However, it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started to get a little odd, and very quickly word of the canyon's evil terror spread far and wide, making it one of the world's most visited places. But not for its beauty, but due to morbid curiosity. And finally, coming in at number 1, Virginia, the Bunny Man Bridge. This terrifying urban legend originated from 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but very quickly spread through the Washington, D.C. area as well. Now, like all legends, there are many variations. Most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or a hatchet. Now the legend goes that in 1904 a group of convicts were piled onto a bus to be transported from an asylum in Clifton, Virginia to a nearby prison. En route, however, one of the buses crashed and the convicts managed to escape. Thankfully though, the police were able to round up all of them. All but one. As their search went on, they began to find skinned, half-eaten bunnies in the woods and hanging from the overpass of Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge. A year later, on Halloween night, several teens went to hang out under the bridge. Come morning, they were all found dead. Legend has it that if you hang out under the bridge on Halloween night, you will meet the same fate as the rabbits and the teenagers. Jump ahead to 1970, there were numerous police reports of people who had been threatened by a man holding an axe and wearing a white suit with bunny ears. Terrifying. A few other people also reported that the man in the suit threw an axe at them for trespassing near the bridge. To this day, there have been numerous reportings of the man with the axe, as well as the dead rabbits in the woods surrounding Fairfax Bridge, which is now known, once again, as the Bunny Man Bridge. Now, versions of the legend have varied over the years, particularly in the Bunny Man's name, motives, weapons, victims, and description, with some accounts stating that victims were mutilated and others that the Bunny Man is a ghost. However, that aside, the legend is absolutely horrifying and has prevented a lot of Virginia locals from wandering too close to the bridge. In at number 5 we have Jim Morrison. Born James Douglas Morrison, he was a singer, songwriter and poet who served as the lead vocalist of the rock band The Doors. However, Morrison developed an alcohol dependency during the 60s, with him passing away unexpectedly at the age of 27 in Paris. As no autopsy was performed, the cause of his death remains unknown. He was ultimately laid to rest in the famous Père Lachaise cemetery. Over the years, his headstones were defaced or stolen until Morrison's own father placed a rather ordinary looking one on the site with an inscription in Greek, which reads, "Against his own demon." However, in 1997, journalist Brett Meisner was visiting the cemetery when he had this photo taken of him, standing in front of Jim Morrison's headstone. However, in the background of the picture, standing in the doorway of a crypt, you can clearly see a semi-transparent figure, arms held wide, which resembles the late singer. Many state that the pose is very reminiscent of a famous photo taken of Morrison. What do you guys think though, ghost or trick of the light? Whatever you think, it's been enough to drive more tourists to the cemetery to attempt to catch a glimpse of the famous singer. In at number 4 we have Sweeney Todd. Now hear me out before we begin. Yes, I know that Sweeney Todd is said to hail from Victorian London, however this legend states that maybe he didn't, and maybe he walked the streets of France. First and foremost though, Sweeney Todd is a fictional character who appeared as the villain of the Victorian petty dreadful serial The String of Pearls. The tale became a staple of Victorian melodrama and London urban legend. A barber from Fleet Street, Sweeney Todd murders his customers with a straight razor and turns their bodies over to Mrs. Lovett, his partner in crime, who bakes their flesh into meat pies. However, could it be that the original Sweeney Todd was not from London but instead hailed from medieval Paris? Legend states that Paris had its very own demon barber during the 14th century, and was perhaps the first home to the cannibalistic pastries from the murderous barber. During this time, the Rue de Marmoussettes was known far and wide for its succulent French delicacies, especially for those made by a butcher next door to a barbershop on the corner. The pies and pastries were said to be so tasty that even King Charles VI was said to have been a fan. From 1384 to 1387, the butcher was said to have been in cahoots with his neighbouring barber, with it being said that the pastries were so scrumptious thanks to the young flesh of the victims of the demon barber. The partnership was said to have thrived for 3 years and would have continued if their gory deeds weren't discovered. It was said that an abandoned dog was what gave them away, who was barking outside the door of the barbers. The police conducted a search and discovered heaps of humans' bones and flesh in the shed underbelly of the two shops. For their crimes, the barber and the butcher were burned alive, along with their shops, in order to exorcise the area from their evil.
Number 3 on this list is the legend of the Hatchet Man. Back in the 1800s, there was a man named Andrew Hellman who owned and operated a cemetery. One evening, Andrew was finishing up his business outside, and he was savagely attacked by an unknown assailant. The attacker had a hatchet and used it to cut Andrew's body up into little tiny pieces. This clearly wasn't enough for the killer though, who then took all of these little bits of Andrew and scattered them around the entire cemetery. Andrew was a nice man and didn't deserve this at all, and he definitely didn't deserve for his soul to get trapped in limbo like it is right now. Legend says that Andrew's spirit still wanders through this cemetery and has completely lost its mind. People have reported hearing the sound of somebody banging a hatchet on gravestones throughout the cemetery, screaming at the top of their lungs as they do it. It has also been reported that they have discovered hatchet scrapings on the tombstones in this cemetery as if somebody had slammed a hatchet on them as hard as they could. Some locals even believe that Andrew's ghost, or Hatchet Man, is so far gone that it has begun killing people. That if you are out in this cemetery late at night and alone, the Hatchet Man's spirit will appear, and if you see him, then this is the last thing that you will do, because you will be murdered by the Hatchet Man. Number 2 on this list is Crybaby Bridge. In Ohio, there are actually many bridges that people claim are the true Crybaby Bridge. However, when I was doing my research, the one that I heard the most about was a bridge located in Fremont. The urban legend of Crybaby Bridge was a sad one. As I imagine you've probably guessed by now, this legend includes a baby. It's said that many years ago a mother took her newborn to this bridge. The baby that she had just given birth to was unwanted. Now it's unclear why this baby was unwanted. Was she incapable of taking care of it? Was potentially her partner involved in the decision? That part of the story, it's not known. But what is known is that she took the child and she threw it into the river to drown and die. Then, after standing there and seeing her baby drown down the river, the mother threw herself over the top and killed herself the same way. People think that she killed herself out of guilt for what she had just done to her child, and this is why I think there has to have been some external factor that we don't know about forcing her to do it in the first place. Whatever the reason though, the killing of a newborn like that, with the amount of guilt and emotion, it leaves something behind. The people of Utah believe that if you go to this bridge in Fremont late at night and wait there, you will start to hear the cries from a newborn baby coming from the waters below. It is also said by the locals that if you stand there long enough, then you may even encounter the phantom form of that mother. She won't cause you any harm, she will only be looking out over the waters, regretting what she had done to her child so many years ago. Number 1 on this list is the portal to hell. Located in Blue Ash, Ohio, the portal to hell is a very eerie looking drain tunnel that was reportedly used by Satanists to open up a gateway straight to hell. The exact story of how the portal was created, it isn't completely concrete, but for the most part, everybody agrees that a satanic group used part of the tunnel as a meeting ground. It was in this tunnel that they started performing their satanic rituals. They reportedly used this place for a lot of sacrifices and would slaughter live animals down there very frequently. This escalated until they made a full-on portal to hell that nobody is closed. People in the area regularly report hearing screaming coming from down inside the tunnel, with others saying that they've seen strange visuals and movements as well. David Scott and John Stevens, who run a show about paranormal activity, got wind of the portal to hell and had to go check it out for themselves to see if the rumors were true. From what they had heard, there was a demon called the Shadow Man that was lurking deep inside the tunnels near the altar room where the Satanists used to sacrifice the bodies. When they go down into the tunnel, for the first bit, everything is as it should be. It's still super creepy tunnel, but nothing paranormal. Then, as they're super deep into the tunnel, they begin to hear footsteps coming from behind them in the darkness. Being paranormal professionals, they pull out this strange looking electronic device and start asking questions to it. Sure enough, a voice comes back to them. They go on to have a full conversation with this voice and learn that a man named Jake was murdered down here. The voice goes on to tell them that the tunnel is a prison and that they must worship Satan here. It also tells them that the Shadow Man is real and is currently down here with them. The conversation finishes with the voice basically claiming that it wants to leave this horrible place and that it is trapped down here. I'm not sure how real their interaction was with this voice, but with the history that this tunnel has had and the amount of people who have had reported sightings of beings and other odd, unexplained things, something is definitely not right about that tunnel, or the portal to hell in Blue Ash, Ohio.
Kicking off with a short one at number 5, we have the Drowgan, who is the ghost of a man who died at sea. In one specific iteration, a man fled from a ghost, calling out to the dead to save him. The next day, the cemetery was covered in seaweed and the graves were wide open. Many claim to see the Drowgan, huge and covered in seaweed, particularly during storms, where he will skin boats and drown sailors. This dude is no fun at all. I would just say stay away from the ocean, stay away from water in general. That is my motto. Coming in at 4, Myling. This is perhaps one of the most disturbing ghost stories, with Myling telling the tale of unwanted or murdered children. Yeah, nothing fun here. Oftentimes the ghosts are referred to as upbird, meaning that which is outside. The ghosts of these children long to be given a proper burial, so they jump on the back of the first person they meet and demand to be taken to a cemetery. In some cases, the Myling drains power from its human ride, and in others, the human is too weak and dies from exertion. The ghost often takes on human form as it gets closer to the burial ground, and is described as a very large spirit. The root of the Myling is believed to be a response to instances of unexplained deaths of children. Yeah, this one is dark. Sure, that makes sense.
Number 3 on this list is the sacrificial lakes. Most of the time when somebody enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in the said. Most of the time when someone enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in said body of water. What they usually aren't as concerned with is becoming food to the actual water itself. That's exactly what some people in Romania believe in regards to some of their bigger lakes though. Lake Vinderel, for instance, is known to some locals as a lake which will actually swallow people up. Even the most skilled swimmers who go here will drown and never be heard from again. Most of the time these bodies are never found, but there's a legend that says a piece of bloody flesh floats on top of the water at all times. Lake Vinderel is one of the most famous, but it isn't the only lake in Romania that has some dark lore around it. One lake literally swallowed up an entire town when a slope collapsed and forced the homes along with a church inside the water. People around that area often hear the ringing of church bells as they pass by the lake, thinking that the spirits of those who died in this tragedy still haunt the area. Because of all this death in these Romanian lakes, it's now believed that sacrifices must be made to keep the water at bay. Yep, that's right guys, what better way to stop people from dying in the lakes than to have people specifically die from the lakes? That's the train of thought, and it's most prevalent in the Maramureș region of Romania amongst the elderly folk who live there. They think that the only way to calm the dark spirits who clearly inhabit these waters is to occasionally offer a human sacrifice. Now I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't able to find exact details on who has been sacrificed or when, but I imagine that this has taken place at least once in Romania's history if there's an entire legend around it. I also find it kind of interesting that the Romanians don't have a particular demon or creature in mind who could be behind this. As of right now, it's just thought that there's a dangerous entity in the lake water and that sacrificing a human should relax that entity at least for a little while. Either way, if you're going to go swimming in Romania, then stay away from the lakes. Number 2 on this list is the World War II ghosts. There's a town called Okna Muirs, and in that town there's a very specific mansion with some very interesting lore surrounding it. That mansion is called the Teleki Mansion. This mansion is really interesting because it didn't actually see much fighting at all, but is currently haunted with ghosts from World War II. The ghosts of these World War II soldiers who haunt this place sadly caused their tragic fate themselves. One evening, the soldiers went into the mansion and decided to enjoy a little bit too much wine. The mansion had cellars full of nice quality bottles, and the soldiers definitely overindulged. In fact, they got so hammered that they decided to start firing off their guns in the basement before passing out. They passed out in the cellar, and it's said that from the guns that they shot off, the wine started filling up the room. They were far too gone to notice and actually drowned in said wine. Now these soldiers haunt the mansion and locals see them regularly. In fact, some blurry photos were taken back in 2011 of these ghosts in the place. Dying is obviously worst case scenario and never what anyone wants, but I guess the one thing that you can say for these guys is that they probably died at least happy. Number 1 on this list is the Nymphs of Sioclavina Cave. Deep in the mountains of Transylvania, through a long road of rivers and beautiful scenery, sits a forgotten cave called the Sioclavina Cave. This cave is full of crazy stuff from the past and has been a really important find for archaeologists studying Romanian history. Tombs, treasures, skeletal remains, and most important, potential evidence of nymphs are all found in this mysterious cavern. In case you aren't familiar with what a nymph is, then Britannica tells us that they were usually associated with fertile, growing things such as trees or with water. They were not immortal but were extremely long-lived and were on the whole kindly disposed toward men. These were women in Greek mythology who were considered divinities. It's believed that this cave may have once been the home to some of them. The treasure that's been found here, some of the inscriptions that are on the wall, the overall environment outside the cave, all of it fits the bill when it comes to a nymph. At the very least, if a nymph or a group of nymphs hadn't have lived here, then people definitely think this would have been a site of worship for them. Animal carcasses were found here as well, and it's believed that they would have been used for some sacrificial rituals to such higher beings. Now this cave is researched extensively, and locals think that it might possess some mysterious powers. Also, that the rivers that run around this area are rich with minerals and other healing properties. I suppose this urban legend isn't super scary, but honestly kinda cool. Then again, nymphs have been known to be dangerous in the past, so if there was one lurking around this cave still, you wouldn't want to get on its bad side.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Ogopogo. Let's start with a famous one. Move over Nessie, we've got a Canadian sea cryptid to discuss. If you've ever been to British Columbia, you'll know that there are plenty of mountains and lakes to explore. One of the more well-known ones, both for its picturesque qualities and supposed housing of a monster, is Lake Okanagan. Situated in Kelowna, this lake is famous for its vacation-friendly beaches. But if you head out looking for a relaxing day on the water, you might meet up with a strange beast. Sightings of the Ogopogo date back to 1972, but indigenous legends have been telling tales of the creature for much longer. It's described as a long, slender creature with many humps and a horse head that peeks out of the lake during thunderstorms. Sound familiar? While not nearly as famous, Ogopogo is quite similar to Nessie when you get down to it. Both are aquatic, hard to find, and attract all sorts of cryptid hunters. All sorts of folks have claimed to see Ogopogo swimming around, popping its head out of the water from time to time. Photos and videos are common, but none are really verifiable or convincing. Thankfully, the creature seems to be relatively friendly. For all these sightings and rumors, there haven't been too many claims of violence or aggression from the lake-dwelling beast. In fact, it's actually quite well liked by everyone. In the 90s, the Canadian government commissioned a postage stamp in honor of Ogopogo. Way to go. Skeptics all have their explanations for what it might actually be, with one prevalent idea claiming that it's actually a primitive whale that only comes out during calmer seasons. Regardless of whether it's real or not, what's more fun to say in the end, Nessie or Ogopogo? I'll let you guys decide. Coming in at number 4, we've got the University of Toronto Phantom Worker. If a film is being shot in Toronto, you're more than likely going to catch a glimpse of U of T's campus. The school's buildings are ornate and beautiful, perfect for giving a scholarly feel to any scene. A lot of the buildings have facades that date back to the early 19th century, giving them a timeless feel. Of course, with any buildings that have been around so long, there will be ghost stories. Back in the 1920s, U of T built a Gothic memorial to honor students who had died during the First World War. During construction of this elaborate memorial, many workers were hired to help out. Legend says that one of the workers fell from the tower while polishing the bells, a true Hunchback of Notre Dame moment. Ever since that fateful incident, students and faculty alike have claimed to see the ghost of the worker wandering around campus. Some even claim that there have been ghostly apparitions falling from the tower. Folks who don't know the legend will run to see if the poor fellow is okay, but never find a body. So much for being a good Samaritan. There are many other ghost stories surrounding the university as well, but none so stomach-dropping. Stonemasons with murderous qualities, little girls lost in planetariums, and a baker who managed to trap his mistress inside a secret room. The stories are real, but are the ghosts still haunting the campus? I suppose you'll have to pay the institution a visit and find out. Just try not to get roped into paying tuition, alright? That's scarier than any ghost story.
Coming in at 3, the sacrificial Bega child. This Swedish legend goes that there was a town called Daland that was inflicted by disease that was wiping out a lot of the population and resulting in many residents fleeing. The townspeople were beside themselves until one day a man from Finland came along with advice on how to stop the disease. He told them that only a sacrifice would put an end to the misery, and explained that they would need to bury a living thing in the ground. The villagers were desperate, so they took his advice. They began the process by burying a rooster alive in the ground, but the act failed to produce any results, so instead they decided to bury an entire goat. However, this also failed. Feeling that they had no other options left, they decided the only sacrifice worthy enough to end the disease would be an actual human being. They set their sights on an orphan boy and offered him bread as bait, which he fell for before dropping into a prepared hole. The villagers began to bury the hapless child, who was absolutely absolutely terrified and pled with them for mercy, but they continued on. Before long, the deed had been done and the child was left to die. However, some villagers claimed they could hear his cries from beneath the ground, begging for them to release him. Coming in at number 2, the Christmas ghosts. This legend begins with a woman preparing to head to midnight Christmas mass. In order for her and her friend to make it on time, they agreed to wake the other and head out at the same time. Late at night, she thought she heard her friend telling her it was time to leave, so she grabbed some bread that she had baked for later and head out. While en route, she stumbled across 2 witches who wished to murder her on the spot. However, they couldn't harm her because of the cross in her pocket. She didn't think much of it and proceeded to the church, heading quickly inside. As she was sitting, she heard something that utterly terrified her. A voice that told her that she could be killed on the spot, but would be spared because the speaker was her godfather. The voice made it clear that she was in terrible danger. She looked around and quickly realized all of the people gathered in the church were headless. She ran, only to be accosted by a ghostly parishioner, who attempted to grab her by the veil. She escaped, but upon her return she saw the remains of her veil that had been seized by the ghosts, ripped into tiny pieces and distributed amongst the graves that were outside the church. Her mind instantly imagining what could have been if the ghost had grabbed her instead of the veil. And finally, coming in at number 1, Catacombs. This legend tells the tale of a very evil woman named Catacombs, who was so despicable she apparently knew the devil himself. They were on first name basis, and she was so nasty that even he sometimes feared her. The devil had been attempting to spread discord between a married couple but had failed, resulting in Kitta mocking him, saying that she could easily complete the deed herself. So she did just that, with the devil's encouragement, even promising her a beautiful pair of shoes if she were to succeed. Kitta first went to the wife, informing her that her husband was a wonderful man, but there was evil in his heart. She claimed she needed to shave her husband under his chin to remove the last of the wickedness that resided in him. The woman agreed, believing this would do good. Kitta next went to the husband, where she praised their marriage and the man's wife, but told him that his wife planned to cut his throat. Straight up savagery. He didn't believe it, but became a little paranoid, so one evening while in bed he pretended to be asleep, during which time his wife attempted to carry out her plan of shaving his chin. Her husband of course believed she was trying to kill him. Now don't fret, they didn't kill each other, but it did create the discord the devil was so hoping for, and Catacombs ended up earning herself a brand new pair of shoes. Good on you, kid. In at 5, the Lady in Red in Lower Bay Station. Now, a Lady in Red is a popular theme in many legends and ghost stories, with few popping up across America and Canada. However, this one comes from Toronto, specifically below Bay Station, where another subway station lies, Lower Bay Station. The Toronto Transit Commission reportedly opened the station in 1966 while experimenting with routes, but soon realized that if the route was to become delayed, it would slow down the entire subway system, therefore it was shut down just 6 months later. The city later went on to build Bay Station on top of it, connecting the 2 platforms with a red door that is only accessible to employees. Workers and occasional movie productions still use the old station, however, and it is here that folks have claimed to have seen the Lady in Red wandering the abandoned tracks. People have reported that she has no legs and had only black holes for eyes. Her apparition only lingers for 30 seconds before disappearing. Some believe it to be a woman that was pushed onto the tracks, but no records of any such incident exist. Others think it's more likely she was a former resident of Potter's Field, a cemetery for social outcasts and the poor, which the city attempted to relocate in 1855 to build the station. Coming in at 4, the legend of Gibraltar Point Lighthouse. The Gibraltar Point Lighthouse is located on the Toronto Islands in Toronto. Beginning in 1808, it is the oldest existing lighthouse on the Great Lakes and one of Toronto's oldest buildings. Now, due to its age, this lighthouse is of course shrouded in mystery, specifically regarding its first keeper, J.P. Radamula. According to the legend, soldiers from Fort York visited J.P. on the evening of January 2nd, 1815 in search of his bootlegged beer, but they had too much to drink and a dispute broke out, culminating in the keeper's murder. The inebriated soldiers tried to conceal their crime by chopping apart the corpse and hiding the remains. In 1893, then keeper George Durnan searched for the corpse and found part of a jawbone and coffin fragments near the lighthouse, though it was never definitively proven that they were linked to JP. As one of the oldest legends in Toronto, the truth behind the lighthouse keeper's death and disappearance remains a mystery even to this day, and the legend certainly lives on.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Nunner Look. We've talked about urban legends from the far west coast and the most populous city, so now let's take a trip out east. Known for its quaint, peaceful charm, Newfoundland is the last place you'd expect to find terrifying urban legends, right? I mean, you can get screeched in and end up with a scary hangover and only a faint memory of your previous night, but that's something else entirely. The monster seen near Newfoundland dwells in the sea, but does so unconventionally. How do you think sea monsters usually get around? By swimming, right? Well, this thing acts a little differently than most. First sighted by Sir Humphrey Gilbert back in the 16th century, it was described as a lion-like creature. This fits the description of an Inuit cryptid known as the Nunner Look. Legends of such a creature have been passed down through generations of people, but it was considered just a legend to outsiders until Sir Humphrey Gilbert came across it himself. The Nunner Look is a gigantic beast estimated to be as tall as an iceberg. It's got white fur, huge ears, and loves to eat anything that gets close enough. Seals are the classic meal, but it won't turn down a human if they get close. Now, back to that bit about movement. The Nunner Look doesn't swim, it walks along the bottom of the ocean. Yep, not the most efficient way to get around, but it gets the job done. Imagine watching a gigantic beast just walk out of the sea towards you. This is also the reason why people say that it's not really ever seen away from shore. It makes sense considering how deep the ocean is. But if you ever spot a little antenna poking out of the water, it's time to get a move on. And if you ever hear a deafening roar, it's probably too late. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Cabbage Tunnel Monster. We'll return to Toronto for a moment, you know, because of the urban qualities of these legends. Get it? Well, every tunnel system has its fair share of legends, and the Cabbage Tunnel is no exception. I'm surprised nobody's gone back and tried to get footage of this strange creature. Back in the 70s, a kitten ran away from home. While searching for his lost feline, a man came across a tunnel in Cabbage Town. Thinking that the kitten might have run in here to hide, he descended down into the abyss. Scanning the darkness for any sign of the little animal, he noticed some motion off to the side. Thinking it might be what he was looking for, the man pointed his flashlight at the movement and saw something he was definitely not expecting, neither cute nor cuddly. He claims to have seen a monkey-like creature with glowing orange eyes standing at half the height of a man covered in gray fur. If that horrible sight wasn't enough, listen to this. The man froze up and kept his light trained on the monster. The monster didn't like this much and told the man in an awful, trembling voice, "Go away. Go away." And guess what the man did next? He hightailed it out of there and didn't look back. This story made its way around for a while, but nobody ever properly looked into it. That is, until a year later. The man's friend had convinced him to share his story, so he went to the Toronto Sun with the scoop. A reporter accompanied him back to the tunnel, and they both scoured the inside. Looking around, they didn't find any evidence of a monster, but they did discover the remains of a cat. Some speculate that the tunnel leads to a point in the Toronto sewer system, and others have different ideas. Either way, nobody has seen the Cabbage Town sewer monster since. Would you go looking? Finally, at number 1, we've got the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. Heading back east for a moment, let's consider the Northumberland Strait. This is a body of water that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. It's said that there is a ghost ship that sails upon the strait, more often than not totally engulfed in flame. The legend dates back over 200 years and always seems to play out the same way. Folks on land will look out to see a beautiful schooner with pure white sails. As they look on, these sails will catch fire and the whole ship starts burning. Often people will head out on rescue missions only to find that there was never a ship to begin with. Legend says that the ship will only appear before a northeast wind, predicting a storm. So where does this ghost ship come from, and why does it always come back? Well, some people believe that the ship was captained by a pirate who made a deal with the devil. The ship had been fired upon and was burning fast. He wanted his treasure hidden and protected, so he signed the pact and sealed his fate. Now he and his crew are doomed to sail forever on this perpetually burning ship. Yikes. Now, skeptics will tell you that the ghost ship is simply a mirage, but if that were the case, then how do they explain the flames? How very Canadian, eh? Coming in at number 5, we've got sewer alligators. Iconic. I think New York sewer alligators might have been one of the first urban legends I was familiar with as a kid. Showed up as a gag in a show I was watching or something. But it's a myth that doesn't seem to disappear. Hell, it even has an incarnation in one of New York's most famous pieces of media, Spider-Man. The lizard, anyone? There's something about the possibility of gigantic carnivores living in the New York City sewer system that has captured the imaginations of folks everywhere. Unfortunately, it's a story that begins with irresponsible pet ownership. Back in the early 20th century, plenty of posh people were looking for exotic pets to bring home with them. Why you would want an alligator in your penthouse is beyond me, but the rich and frivolous thought this was a smashing idea. Now, we all know this is a bad call, but hindsight wasn't quite a thing yet back then. So these folks brought baby alligators home and made cooing noises at their tiny green pals. However, they don't stay tiny and cute forever, so when these alligators became problematic, it was common for their owners to ditch them in any way they could. Some chose to flush them, but it's likely that they were too big at that point to fit down the pipes. This resulted in many being tossed down into the sewers at ground level. The legend says that these gators managed to do quite well for themselves in the dank tunnels, feasting on rats, growing up, and finding other alligators to have little alligator sewer babies with. This all came to a head in 1935 when the Times ran an article headlined, "Alligator Found in Uptown Sewer." A bunch of folks had located and killed an 8-footer out near the Harlem River, giving credence to the rumors. From there, the legend was cemented into city lore. The actual probability of alligators thriving in the sewers is next to none, but the believers keep on believing. Coming in at number 4, we've got Montauk Mind Control. SCP fans might recognize that name, Montauk. It's a hamlet at the far east end of Long Island. Because of this, it can be interpreted as the end, which kind of makes sense in that context. Stranger Things fans might have their ears perked up right now too, as rumors surrounding this village at the end of the island are bases for some parts of the show. There's an old military base out there known as Camp Hero. It's been shut down for a while, but there are whispers of some sinister stuff happening way back when. All sorts of top secret classified experiments are said to have occurred from the 60s through the 80s. The kind of stuff that would never go public because it's pretty messed up. It's almost sci-fi inspired, to be honest. Being at the end of the island lent them a fair deal of privacy, which meant the folks at the base could get up to all sorts of trouble. The big one that folks talk about has to be psychic experiments. Of course, experimenting on adults is no good. They're already fully developed and likely haven't exercised their psychic abilities. It's rumored that children were kidnapped and brought in and forced to undergo psychic experiments. They were put through all sorts of extreme tests and trials to see if they could unlock their hidden potential. Was it to create a new type of human weapon? Could it have been for the sake of espionage? Did anything really come of it? It really does smack of Stranger Things, doesn't it? An electrical engineer that claims to have worked at the site says they had alien technology there, which allowed them to turn kids into psychic warriors, which is a lot to claim, especially as it opens up the possibility of alien contact. These days, you can visit Camp Hero yourself whenever you want, as it's been converted into a state park. So maybe go and see if you can sense anything, or maybe even find some alien relics.
In at number 3 we have the Ghost of the Grey Lady and Longleat House. Longleat House is an English stately home and the seat of the Marquis of Bath. The house was originally built by Sir John Tyne and was designed mainly by Robert Smithson after Longleat Priory was destroyed by fire in 1567. It took almost 12 years to complete and is often regarded as one of the finest examples of Elizabethan architecture in Britain. Sounds magical, right? Well, it has a dark side, one of deceit and murder. It all began back in 1733 when Lady Louisa married Viscount Weymouth, who owned the Longleat estate. Louisa moved into the home with him, bringing with her a number of her own servants. It was said that she was fond of one of her footmen, who she described as loyal and true. Now, this favoritism wasn't taken well among the other servants, and out of jealousy they told Viscount Weymouth that the footman was having an affair with Louisa, which of course wasn't true. Now, this is where the story gets a little blurry. Some say Weymouth paid someone to push the footman down the stairs, while others say he did it himself. Either way, the footman broke his neck and his body was buried in the cellar. This took a toll on Lady Louisa, who developed pneumonia, which resulted in her death at the young age of 22. According to visitors of Longleat House, you can find a lady dressed in grey creeping along the house's corridors, especially close to the library where the footman died. Coming in at number 2 we have the Beast of Bodmin Moor. The Beast of Bodmin Moor is a phantom cat purported to live in Cornwall, England. The creature is said to be panther-like and black-furred, with it stalking around Bodmin Moor killing livestock. Sightings of the beast were reported back in 1978 after mutilated slain livestock were found in the area. Some people propose that the beast had escaped from a zoo, and as it was illegal to own one privately, the former owner could not report it to the police. It has been claimed that animal trainer Mary Chipperfield had released 3 pumas into the wild following the closure of her Plymouth Zoo in 1978, and perhaps this is what gave rise to rumours of the beast. Jumping forward to 1995, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food conducted an official investigation, with there being no verifiable evidence of exotic exotic felines loose in Britain, and that instead the livestock could have been killed by indigenous species. However, less than a week after the government report, a boy was walking by the River Fowey when he discovered a large cat skull, measuring about 4 inches long by 7 inches wide. The skull was lacking its lower jaw, but possessed 3 sharp, prominent canines that suggest it may have been a leopard. It was immediately sent to the Natural History Museum in London for verification, with them determining that it was a genuine skull from a young male leopard. And finally, in at number 1 we have Spring-Heeled Jack. Originating from Victoria-era Britain, Spring-Heeled Jack is a character from urban legend that was first supposedly sighted back in 1837. However, over the years more frequent tales have emerged. His name is said to come from his ability to leap over great distances and heights. Not too shabby. The very first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack came in October of 1837, when a woman named Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill when a tall-coated man leapt from the building into the street. He then grabbed her with his metal claws and kissed her before tearing at her clothes. After her screams were heard, he fled the scene, leaping back into the building he came from. Following the encounter, more accounts occurred, with the most notable being the Alsop case. The Alsop case was one of the most widespread stories about Jack, with it being published in several newspapers. Jane Alsop recalls the moments when she was attacked, stating, "I answered the door of my father's house to a man claiming to be a police officer, who told me to bring a light, claiming, 'We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane.' I brought the person a candle and noticed that he wore a large cloak. The moment I had handed him the candle, however, he threw off the cloak and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, vomiting blue and white flame from his mouth while his eyes resembled red balls of fire. She also reported that he wore a large helmet and that his clothing, which appeared tight-fitting, resembled white oilskin. No one was ever caught and identified as Spring-Heeled Jack, which of course led to numerous theories of his nature and identity. Skeptical investigators have dismissed these stories though and claim Spring-Heeled Jack is a product of mass hysteria, which developed around various stories of a boogeyman and devil. Coming in at 5, Princess Brunhild at Rostrap. This legend goes that years ago there ruled a king in Bohemia, whose castle was atop a loft mountain, where thunder and eagles found a home. Now this king had a daughter, Princess Brunhild, whose beauty was famous far and wide. Rulers and their sons sought the hand of the maiden, and among the suitors came the son of the King of Hars, who won her heart. He returned to his father to announce his betrothal, and to make arrangement for the nuptials. However, someone had other plans. A new suitor arrived for Brunhilde's hand, a terrible giant who inhabited North Europe, terrifying all those who saw him. He brought with him costly gifts of gold, amber and precious stones, and after a few days of consideration the king promised the giant his daughter. Now the giant had 2 steeds, one white as snow and the other black as night, both giant, with the earth trembling beneath them as they ran. So one day Brunhilde begged to ride with the giant. She mounted the white steed and raced to be with her true love Hars. The black steed was in quick pursuit behind her. At the very top of the treacherous Rostrap, Brunhilde reached the cliff edge. However, her brave white stallion had other ideas and jumped right across the mountain and reached the other side. The giant, however, did not and ultimately plunged to his death. Atop the Rostrap hill in the Hars mountain range you will find the hoof shapes imprinted into the rock on the edge of the cliff, marking the path the great white steed took when freeing the trapped princess. Coming in at 4, the Watzmann Mountain. The Watzmann is a mountain in the Bavarian Alps and is the 3rd highest in Germany, and the highest mountain located entirely on German territory. Now, for a mountain so famous throughout the country, you can imagine there would be a handful of legends associated with it. And that there are. One legend goes that in the deepest corners of southern Bavaria, a tyrannical king named Watzmann reigned the land, and enjoyed slavery and hunting local peasants. On one particular day, after a series of bloody killings, a curse was cast upon him and his family, which resulted in them all turning to stone. Now it is said that they are still entombed within the range of 7 mountains, near the town of Berchtesgaden. Would you climb this peak to discover if the legend is true? If so, I'll be right there with you.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Mazzarol. Speaking of non-human entities, let's take a quick trip to the mountains. The Italian Dolomites, to be specific. No relation to the comedian turned movie star recently played by Eddie Murphy. This mountain range sits stoutly in northeastern Italy and is full of legends and secrets. Plenty of cryptids and creatures are said to roam these mysterious mountains, from fairies to wizards and witches to mythical royalty. But the creature that piques my interest the most is the Mazzarol. In the valleys of Belluno province, this myth is still well known and widespread. This tiny, playful creature resembles a gnome, so make sure you tag your friends and let them know they've been known. Woo! Now that I've made my requisite meme reference for the day, I can get to the actual details. This tiny, cap-wearing dude dressed in red wanders around the woods. For him to simply wander would be kind of boring though, so of course there's some darkness to this myth. He loves to find folks traveling around dusk and then lead them astray. Anyone who treads on top of his footprints is compelled by forces unknown to follow them all the way back to the no man's cave, after which they will forget everything about themselves. Many a tourist has fallen victim to the Mazarol's mean-spirited trickery. Some legends even say that the Mazarol will abduct the occasional individual and make them his slave. The story goes that the gnome managed to steal a young woman away from her village and put her to work. He was kind during this time and taught her many skills: cheese making, butter churning, and more. He even promised to teach her how to extract wax from whey. However, he was never able to complete this final task, as one day a hunter stumbled upon the missing girl and brought her back home. A remedy made from goat's milk brought her memory back, and the girl, overwhelmed with gratitude, taught the villagers how to make cheese and butter. To this day though, nobody has figured out how to extract wax from whey. Maybe someone will seek out the Mazarol and find out though. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Witches of Monta Matana. More mountainous mythical monsters are waiting for you. If you make your way out to Monta Matana, you will find world-class hiking and some unexpected extracurriculars. That's right, you can go witch hunting. Years ago, it was said that this mountain was a popular spot for witches to perform rituals and human sacrifices. They practiced their magics upon the crags and cliffs and amassed great fortunes. Reincarnations of these witches are said to return often in search of their material wealth from past lifetimes. The reality of this wealth is often called into question, but that doesn't stop treasure seekers from braving the range. Some of these booty seekers say they've encountered violent witches willing to slit their throats, but have somehow made it out alive. Maybe other proverbial pirates didn't make it out so well. Either way, Monta Matana is well known for magic, and you'd probably be best off if you just avoided making the perilous journey at night, unless you'd like to run into some witches, and in that case I'll reserve judgment. And finally, at number 1, we've got Poveglia Island. This tiny island about a half-mile from Venice has been shut off from the public for years. Some call it the Plague Island. Why? Well, I'll get to explaining. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, this fortified island was used as a quarantine station. Over 160,000 infected folks were brought here to live out their last painful days away from the healthier portion of the population. Many mass graves have been discovered nearby over the years, proving how unfortunate anyone who paid Poveglia a visit really was. Napoleon stored weapons on this island as well, and when it was discovered, many small battles were waged. This, of course, added to the island's body count. Even later on, a mental hospital was built on the island. Legends say that one of the doctors in charge would treat his patients horribly, often torturing them and tossing them from the bell tower. With all these horrifying historic events taking place on the island, it's no wonder that folks think it's haunted. In fact, there's absolutely zero public access to this island. The folks in charge have deemed it too dangerous to visit. Venturing out to Poveglia is literally illegal. What could they be hiding out there?
In at number 5, we have the Beast of Hackney Marshes. This legend dates back to 1981 when 4 kids were crossing the marshes on a winter's morning. It is said that they happened upon, I quote, a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. Naturally, people began to assume that this was some kind of hideous monster. It remained a legend going forward, but wasn't spotted again until 2012 when it was captured on camera. Helen Murray, a university student, was out for a stroll near the dense woodland area when she said she was stopped in her tracks by an unknown animal, which she stated was larger than a person and covered in shaggy black fur. I quote, I tried to stay calm as I wasn't sure what kind of animal it was or if it was even alive. I had my phone ready to call 999, then the creature moved. Somehow I managed to take a couple of pictures before I ran. I managed to get away but was scared half to death. Now, she didn't contact the police because she feared they wouldn't believe her. However, the story certainly revived memories of the unexplained sighting that occurred in 81. Officers have stated that they believe neither of these sightings were hoaxes, and that 2 bear carcasses had previously been found nearby in the River Lee, and to this day it remains a mystery how they even got there. So, were the bears killed by this creature? Were the bears the creature? We don't have bears in England, so... stumped. In at number 4, the Killer Pool in Epping Forest. Epping Forest is a 2,400 hectare area of ancient woodland between Epping in Essex and Forest Gate in Greater London. Over 100 lakes and ponds are found in the forest. However, there is only one that is referred to as the Killer or Suicide Pool. This legend grew rapidly in popularity after Irish author Elliot O'Donnell wrote about it in his book Haunted Britain, stating that there is a pool in Epping Forest that is home to unearthly presences, some miserable and some evil evil. Now, there is one story about the pool that goes as follows. Around 300 years ago, a couple engaged in a forbidden relationship, meeting secretly at the pond in the forest. However, the girl's father found out about the relationship, and in a fit of anger, he killed her at the pool. After learning about his girlfriend's death, the lover committed suicide at the very same spot. Following these tragic events, no birds were heard and no animals were ever seen in that area again. The water also became dank, and not dank in a good way, bad dank. On top of that, it is said that people with no inclination went on to commit suicide there, including a woman in 1887 and a young servant, Emma Morgan, who killed herself and her child. Jumping forward to 1959, a competition in a magazine was held to find the exact location of the pool. One writer claimed to know but refused to reveal the details, stating that the place was evil beyond measure. I quote, "The suicide pool is deep in the heart of the forest, far from any road. It is dank, evil and malignant, with an atmosphere unpleasant beyond description. I doubt if the sunshine ever penetrates through the surrounding trees. If it did, it would never lighten the black waters."
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Empire State Bermuda Triangle. You're all familiar with the actual Bermuda Triangle, right? You know, the mystical portion of ocean between Miami, San Juan, and Bermuda that supposedly disappears ships, planes, and anything else that passes through? Well, apparently there's a spot like that in New York, sort of. If you ask around long enough, you might hear the tale of the Midtown Bermuda Triangle. In 2008, folks started noticing something odd. All sorts of cars would die for seemingly no reason and refuse to start back up again. It happened so often that people started looking for reasons why. Someone made the observation that all of these shutdowns seemed to be happening within 5 blocks of the Empire State Building. Mechanics got used to driving out, towing the dead cars a few blocks, and having them work perfectly once again. There are all sorts of theories as to why this happens, but the prevailing idea is that radio signals coming from the Empire State Building's broadcast tower were causing some sort of interference. Maybe they were inadvertently screwing with car alarm systems, stopping them from starting. However, this problem seems to have solved itself without anyone really addressing what was going on. So, was there a mysterious dead zone around the Empire State Building, or were folks just reading too far into their car troubles? Coming in at number 2, we've got mole people. We started with some underground reptiles, now let's get to some mammals. Humanoid mammals. Deep below the city, among the many subway tunnels and sewer systems, lives a city of people not accustomed to sunlight. Mole people. Well, probably not actual mole people, it's just a nickname they all got for living underground. In all likelihood, there are plenty of people living under New York. There are over 700 miles of subway tracks, plenty of which are closed off. So there's lots of space to set up a subterranean life. Rumors of these people living below the surface date back to the 1800s when the subway was first being built. The city had done its best to prevent people from settling in under there, but that's much easier said than done. Often subway construction gets delayed when workers come face to face with some of the tunnel dwellers. If someone was trying to run a train through your house, you'd be unwilling to move too. And finally at number 1, we've got Cropsey. Oh, now this one is spooky. A legend among Staten Island youth, Cropsey is a figure shrouded in mystery. Some say that he was a respected member of the community that went mad after his son died. Others claim that he was admitted into a mental institution, became a janitor, and then started to kill. The origin story changes from person to person, but his actions do not. Cropsey kidnaps and kills children. He's the Staten Island boogeyman. Summer camps and island tours galore love to scare the daylights out of folks by telling them the tale of the killer on the loose. There's even a slasher movie from the 80s that features a Cropsey character. It's called The Burning. But get this, the legend might actually be true. Sure, he's not around anymore, but it turns out there really was a mad janitor who kidnapped and killed children. Andre Rand worked at Willowbrook, a now defunct mental institution on the island. In 1987, Rand was convicted of kidnapping and murder and racked up more charges later on. Did he inspire the legend, or was he inspired by it? We may never know. Rand is currently serving 2 sentences of 25 to life, but it's doubtful he's getting out. There's a fascinating and freaky documentary about the story of Cropsey that came out in 2009 that investigates the events surrounding the legend. Right on. The concrete jungle seems a little more cursed than before, doesn't it? Rent prices aren't the only scary thing out there. Coming in at number 5, we've got water blades. While this may be a tale told around the world, it seems to have a strong presence in Italy. Sure, the name sounds cool, maybe even conjuring up some images of wicked aquatic swords, but the reality of water blades is horrific. In fact, if you really like water parks, you might want to skip this entry altogether. I don't want to just ruin them forever for you. We've all heard of razor blades and other assorted sharp objects showing up where they shouldn't. Halloween candy, playground equipment, carpet, door handles, and more. But those are all relatively controllable once you've realized the present danger. Water blades, on the other hand, will rip and tear until there's nothing left. The urban legend floating around implies that some folks have been fastening razor blades to parts of water slides at popular theme parks in Italy. You can imagine what might happen if someone went slip sliding down one of these horrible traps. Maim is an understatement in cases like these. Thankfully, this urban legend seems to be staunchly set in the false category. For something that purportedly happens quite often, reports of such activity are very rare. The actual affliction of rapidly descending individuals doesn't seem to happen. Still, the legend must be very effective, especially because it seems to get told so often. I suppose the lesson to be learned from this one is be careful using public facilities. Good advice, especially in these days and times. Coming in at number 4, we've got Pier Zanfretta's alien encounters. Everyone knows a friend of a friend who claims to have been abducted by aliens, and if not abducted, then maybe they saw a UFO or something. But this Italian security guard has a claim to fame so out there it might as well be in outer space. He says that he was abducted by aliens 5 times over the course of 3 years. All abductions happened in Genoa, all apparently while he was still working the night shift. Skeptics, as skeptics do, dismiss these claims, but apparently he's given details of each abduction while under the influence of truth serum. Pretty astronomical, don't you think? The very first abduction occurred late one night. Zanfretta was patrolling and saw what appeared to be 4 lights. After seeing this, the engine, lights, and radio went out in his patrol car. Thinking, as most security guards should, that there might be thieves about, he ran over to investigate. He did not discover a group of miscreants though. No, he found himself face to face with some extraterrestrial life. A UFO was floating above and he was abducted by these outer space dwelling individuals. While approaching the so-called scene of the crime, Zanfretta was grabbed from behind. When he turned around, he saw a creature he could only describe as an enormous, green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin, as though he were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic, no less than 10 feet tall. This, of course, was only the beginning of Zanfretta's galactic incidents. He's run into interplanetary assailants again and again, sometimes even when he had backup. Following some encounters, special investigators were called in. They discovered distinct markings on the ground that didn't seem of human origin, but nobody but Zanfretta has laid eyes on the creatures themselves. His claims have intensified the belief of an alien presence near Genoa and has made a bit of a celebrity out of the now elderly security guard. His last abduction took place in 1980 while he was under close observation. These days, he claims that the aliens contact him directly, communicating with questionable motivation. So if you're at all interested in close encounters with the third kind, Genoa might be the place to be.
Coming in at 3, UFO encounter in Manitoba. All the way back in 1967, Stefan Michalek ventured into the woods around Falcon Lake near Winnipeg, Manitoba, in search of silver and quartz, when he was startled by a gaggle of geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. According to his own report, he then noticed 2 cigar-shaped crafts hovering in the air before one flew away. However, the other one landed. Stefan stated that he waited half an hour before approaching. He heard mechanical noises, smelled sulfur, and felt warm air as he gradually got closer. As he did, he noticed an open door panel, and coming from within were colored lights and muffled voices that sounded like humming. Then, out of nowhere, the door panel closed, and a blast of gas from the craft knocked Stefan back and off his feet, with his clothes being set ablaze. He managed to take them off and ran into town when he began to feel extremely sick. Doctors quickly discovered that his sickness was caused by radiation, and officials who checked the site also discovered radioactive soil samples and metal melted into the rocks. Now, since then, the son of Stefan has written a book about the ongoing mystery. Stan Michalek, the son of Stefan, has previously stated that he very clearly remembers the day his dad came home sick and injured after something happened to him in the Falcon Lake woods. I quote, "I recalled seeing him in bed. He didn't look good at all. He looked pale, haggard. When I walked into the bedroom, there was a huge stink in the air, like a real horrible aroma of sulfur and burnt motor. It was all around and it was coming out of his pores. It was bad." The book was launched back in 2017 in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the incident. In at 2, Headless Ghosts in Old Montreal. The historic neighborhood of Old Montreal in Quebec is known to be one of the most haunted places in all of Canada. The city's oldest road, St. Paul Street, is supposedly a walkway for the paranormal at night, with visitors often reporting sightings of ghostly horse-drawn carriages or an apparition of Marie Joseph Angelique wearing the same white robe she had on when she was executed. Not only that, but Mary Gallagher, former Lady of the Night, is reported to appear on William and Murray Streets every 7 years, looking for her head, which was taken off by her one-time best friend. If this doesn't do it for you, you can also head over to the old Montreal graveyards, which are known to be abound with ghostly activity, especially in Mount Royal, North America's largest intact cemetery. Visitors have claimed to see apparitions wandering around the plots at night, as well as hear giggling, creaking, and other eerie noises coming from within the cemetery. More interesting still, some of the ghosts that people have reported seeing include several people who perished on the Titanic, and an often seen Algonquin man who looks over the cliff to the city below. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Cave Monster. One of the most haunting legends to come out of Canada comes to us from my city, Toronto, once again, and supposedly took place in August 1978. It was during this time that a 51-year-old man named Ernest went looking for his missing kitten in a Parliament Street tunnel after crawling into an opening near his apartment building. This is where he described seeing a monster that had grey fur, red eyes, and weighing approximately 30 pounds. Now, if you're not from Toronto, we have a sprawling path system, 28 kilometers of climate controlled underground walkways and shopping. However, what if I told you this wasn't the only underground city we have? Well, as reported by the Toronto Sun in March 1979, about 10 feet into the tunnel that Ernest explored, he spotted a thin, human-like figure some 3 feet tall, with, as previously mentioned, grey fur and slanted orange-red eyes. The creature supposedly hissed at him, stating, get out," before fleeing down a side tunnel. Now, it is possible that Ernest was hallucinating or even lying, although saying that, the way the article was written seems to suggest that Laurie Goldstein, the reporter, believed him. Unfortunately, we'll likely never know what actually happened. When the story broke, the entrance to the tunnel had effectively been blocked off by collapsing concrete. Goldstein no longer remembers where the opening was, making the location virtually impossible to find. However, not long ago, someone online spoke of the underground tunnel that may have brought new light to the mystery. I quote, "There is a small opening to the underground tunnels off Parliament Street in downtown Toronto. The entrance is between 2 apartment buildings and leads to the tunnels via the sewers. The underground city beneath Toronto has its centre beneath Gerrard Street and Church Street. Above this area, strange magnetic effects have been observed. It is believed that underground equipment utilising powerful magnetic fields are responsible for the bizarre equipment failures that often are the cause of these accidents." Well, now we know the tunnels are real, do you believe the monster is? You decide. Coming in at 5, Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. In Limerick City stands an impressive piece of stonework by the name of Thomond Bridge, which spans the dark waters of the River Shannon. The bridge was built back in 1836 by a pair of designers named James and George Payne, and according to rumours, their last name would set the tone of future happenings for years to come. The story surrounding the bridge is that of Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. Thady was the local troublemonger in Sloven, and the lady was the wife of the Bishop of Limerick. However, unbeknownst to her husband, she enjoyed a life of vice when the sun went down. One night, while both women were out and about on the bridge, they crossed paths with one another and began to fight, as you do. The Bishop's Lady attempted to push Thady into the river below. However, when she attempted to beg God to forgive her wicked ways and spare her life, the push was unsuccessful. The struggle only ended when the Bishop's Lady fell into the water instead and quickly drowned. Now, there are many who say the furious spirit of the Bishop's Lady haunts the Thomond Bridge, ready to pull late night walkers into the water below. However, don't fret, because apparently the Bishop Lady's fingerprints will appear on the stone side of the bridge before she pulls you below, so you have time to run. If you see fingers, run. Not all fingers are good fingers. Coming in at 4, the patron of Gravediggers Pub. The Gravediggers Pub has been standing since 1833 and is named for its original owner, John Kavanagh, who fathered 25 children and has a handful of descendants still alive today. And now the pub is in Glasnevin, which is also known for its cemeteries, both Glasnevin Cemetery and Prospect Cemetery, which lies directly beside the pub, in turn giving it its nickname. Due to this, one long-standing tradition is for patrons to order a pint by shoveling a scoop of graveyard dirt against the outside outside wall of the pub. So as you would expect with the pub being so close to the cemetery, it gets a handful of guests that aren't on the same plane as us. One of the pub's most well-known customers is regarded very fondly by the living regulars. The spirit takes the form of an older gentleman in vintage tweed and has been known to appear in the corner of the bar, quietly enjoying a Guinness until he finishes his pint and vanishes from sight. The staff actually encourage those who see him to buy him a pint for the road. In my opinion, they're just trying to take your cash. Coming in at 3, the Changeling. A changeling is a creature found in folklore throughout Europe, specifically Germany, and is believed to be a fairy child that had been left in place of a human child stolen by the fairies. It's a common theme stemming all the way back to medieval literature and reflects concern over infants thought to be afflicted with diseases or disorders. So this specific legend goes that once upon a time, at Heslock near Odenheim, a servant and a cook of a clergyman were married and living together. However, their newborn baby would not grow or gain weight. The mother was told to visit Neuhausen and give her baby water from the Syriac spring, with many believing that a visit to the spring would either restore a child back to health or would kill it within 9 days. En route to the spring, the child became heavy and monstrous in her arms, which resulted in a passing traveller yelling to the wife that she had the devil on her back. I quote, "Your child is at home in a new cradle behind the chest in the side room. Throw this monster into the brook." The mother cried but did as she was told. She threw the creature into the brook and a great howl bellowed from beneath the bridge. She fled home where she found her baby, healthy and laughing in its brand new cradle. Coming in at 2, the Children's Crusade. According to history, the Children's Crusade was a failed crusade by European Christians to regain the Holy Land from the Muslims, said to have taken place in 1212. Now the story has become blurred over the years from factual to more mythical, with some versions including the visions by a French boy and a German boy, an intention to peacefully convert Muslims in the Holy Land to Christianity, with bands of children marching to Italy, and some being sold into slavery. Yeah, it's rough. In this specific German legend though, the story tells of a misguided German boy who was visited by Jesus, who told him to go forth and convert Muslims. So following the orders of Christ, he gathered a sizable group, mostly children, and led them towards the Mediterranean, where they took boats east. Now during their journey, one boat crashed, killing everyone on board. The others, however, arrived in Tunisia, where the children were sold into slavery, and in turn, none of them made it to their destination. Sad. I would have rather been on the boat. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Werewolf of Morbach. This legend goes that the Rhineland town of Wittlich is the last place in Germany where a werewolf had been killed. Thomas Johannes Baptist Schweister, what a name that is, was a supposed deserter from Napoleon's army and fled to his homeland in France. While passing through Wittlich, him and his hungry soldiers who fled with him located a farmhouse which they pillaged. However, in the process they were discovered by a farmer who they promptly killed along with his sons. The farmer's wife witnessed the deed and cursed Thomas, screaming, "From now on at each full moon you will change into a rabid wolf." So what did Thomas do? He crushed her skull, of course. Anyway, as time went on, the curse began to take effect and Thomas's personality changed. He began to rob, rape and pillage until he eventually fled to the sanctuary of the deep forest, where he took on his wolf form. He began to slaughter livestock and animals in his new form before a group of villagers discovered him, killed him near the village of Morbach, and buried him. They lit a candle that would burn continually. As long as the candle is lit, the werewolf could never return. In at 5, the Witch Girl of Pilot's Knob. Now this legend comes to us from Marion, Kentucky, where a young girl is said to be buried in a concrete grave. Back in 1916, a woman named Mary Louise Ford and her 5-year-old daughter Mary Ellen Ford were living in Pilot's Knob. The mother and daughter were accused of being witches, and instead of waiting for the trial, the frightened villagers dragged the mother and daughter out of the house and burned them alive at the stake. Classic witch business. They then buried the mother's body in a different location, and to avoid the young girl coming back from the dead and seeking revenge, the fearful villagers made sure to take precautions. They buried the daughter in Pilot's Knob in a steel reinforced coffin, and then after lowering it into the grave, they filled it with concrete. Following that, they put gravel on top and built a metal fence all around the gravesite. Yeah, they were pretty damn scared. scared. According to legend, the young girl's ghost paces back and forth behind the fence, searching for her mother who was buried somewhere else. Yet she cannot escape the confines of the fence. Many locals have even reported seeing tiny child's footprints in the gravel over her grave, and some believe that if you visit the girl's grave alone and get too close, her hands will come up and grab a hold of you and drag you down into the concrete. Folks who have reported to see her go say that she wears a white dress that is scorched at the bottom and her long blonde hair smolders at the ends. In at 4, the Hanging Man of Allendale Train Tunnel. The Allendale Train Tunnel is located south of Cincinnati in the woods behind the Allendale Trailer Park in Ellesmere, Kentucky. Now, legend goes that some years ago a man hung himself from a hook that is set above the tunnel entrance. The man's ghost is said to walk the tunnel or even appear hanging from the hook. Not only that, but there are also reports of disembodied voices as well as screams coming from inside the tunnel. Now, for those seeking to locate the tunnel, there has been some confusion simply because it's known as a train tunnel, yet no trains run through it. It's actually a tunnel for the stream that runs under the tracks. In order to reach it, you must enter the woods, travel down a hill and follow the stream to reach the tunnel, which is now heavily graffitied and littered. Although in urban legend, one element rings true. There is a hook above the entrance to the tunnel, the clear indicator that you're in the right place. Enjoy. Coming in at number 3, the Jervis Ghosts. Jervis Street, located in the middle of Dublin city centre, has served as the backdrop for many encounters with the unknown and the world of the dead through their eyes, proving that ghosts can be seen and felt almost anywhere, even on populated high streets. The Jervis Shopping Centre opened back in 1996 and is currently home to over 70 retailers, and surprisingly is a popular destination for many ghost hunters out there. Some history for you. Not everyone may know this, but the shopping centre was actually built on the ground of Jervis Street Hospital, which closed in the 1980s after attending the needs of the sick and dying for almost 300 years. Many of course credit the creepy goings on in Jervis Street area to the restless spirits who died in its wards. In 2008, a newsreader from the radio station Today FM was apparently walking along the busy street outside Jervis Shopping Centre only to be stopped in their tracks by a female voice singing a lullaby close by. Creepy. The newsreader assumed they were hearing things and continued to walk with the lullaby fading out. However, it quickly became louder again as she moved further away. The moment lingered with her to the point that she mentioned it on her talk show, and within minutes the lines were flooded with callers citing similar occurrences. Many workers from the shopping centre claimed to have seen the figure of a woman in an old nurse's uniform wandering between the stores, while others told of fruit being tossed through the air by seemingly no one. One person, while approaching the centre's bathrooms, was eyed by a woman who whispered at them before vanishing into thin air, and several others mentioned having met similar spirits not far from the centre. Sure, that makes sense. Coming in at 2, the moving mother of Ballinspittle. In July 1985, something strange occurred in the village of Ballinspittle, Cork. While travelling home one evening, a local reported seeing a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary moving on its own accord. And while some summed it up to a trick of the light, countless other locals have also reported similar occurrences. People from the village as well as people from abroad flocked to the site where the activity seemed to be occurring, with up to 100,000 people said to have visited Ballinspittle alone. The Catholic Church was of course a little uncertain of the legitimacy of the case, with one bishop outright calling it an illusion. According to a team of psychologists from University Cork though, the vision was the result of staring at stationary objects during the transient light of dusk. Anthropologist Peter Mulholland also said that the visions of the Virgin Mary in Irish culture is simply the result of the population's relationship with religion. However, what the answer is anyone's guess. There's plenty out there who truly believe the Mother of God did appear all over Ireland between July and August of 1985. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Black Cat of Killachy. Back in 1968, Margaret O'Brien and her husband purchased an abandoned home on the outskirts of Dublin City. However, they could have never predicted the events that were soon to unfold. Margaret originally intended to restore the property and turn it into an art centre, so she allowed several workmen to live on site to maintain pace. Soon though, the workmen began to report back to the O'Briens with some disturbing stories. After dark each night, they would hear animal sounds from within the walls of the house, even though they couldn't find any evidence of an infestation. Margaret disregarded their concerns, however she quickly came to learn of the building's strange condition herself. One evening when arriving at the house to speak with the project's lead painter, Margaret was met with more claims of wild animals loose on the property. So this time she agreed to stay the night in order to observe. Walking to her room, she saw for the first time a gargantuan black cat sitting in the middle of the hallway. She claimed the creature was no ordinary house cat, but rather panther-esque, with evil and intelligence in its gaze. In a split second though, the creature disappeared. Soon after the incident, the lead painter was visited by the huge cat, however this time it brought along with it mist. Due to all of these events, Margaret contacted a local priest to perform an exorcism on the home, as you would, which actually seemed to be effective. So Margaret finally opened the art centre, however peace didn't last because one evening a group of drunken actors decided to hold a seance in an attempt to call upon the monstrous cat that they had heard so much about. They were seemingly successful because the haunting resumed more powerfully this time, with the cat now being joined by the malevolent spirits of two nuns who began to terrorize the building's gallery. This time Margaret called for a medium for help and finally learned the truth of the cat. The medium told her that the female spirits had been attendants of the satanic rituals performed by the infamous Hellfire Club. She went on to suggest that the house was once owned by its members. Recently in 2012, the theory finally got some bulk, with another site said to have been frequented by Hellfire members, with a painting of a black cat bathed in flames being uncovered. Coming in at 5, Huldra, also known as Hulda. These are seductive forest creatures found in Scandinavian folklore. Huldra derives from a root meaning covered or secret and is often depicted as just one individual. However, through folklore it has changed to an entire Hulda race and not just one single entity. Hulda is described as being a troll-like woman living in the woods and is known to be fair and beautiful, but wild, and is known to have long hair which she hides behind her back upon meeting a human. This legend goes that Adam and Eve had a handful of children, and one day when Eve was giving her children a bath, God came to visit her. However, Eve had not yet bathed all her children, so she hid the ones that were dirty. God asked her, "Are there not more children?" Eve said no. So God responded, "Then let all that is hidden remain hidden." And thus the ones hidden became the Underduriski, excuse my pronunciation please, which means the ones living underground. The hidden children became lost souls under the surface of the earth, calling for someone to be with them, usually human passerbys. Huldra was one of these children, yet somehow managed to remain on the surface of the earth. Be warned, she is neither good nor evil and cannot be trusted. Coming in at 4, Jotni, also known as Jotun or Jotnar. This legend is described as being a type of entity contrasted with gods and other figures such as dwarfs and elves. In Norse mythology, Jotni appears as a giant being, often ugly and lumpy, with many of them in possession of great knowledge. Oftentimes the Jotni is described as riding on a wolf with vipers as reins, and is believed to be depicted in this 10th century picture stone from the Hunnestad monument. As I previously stated, most Jotni possess great wisdom. For example, Vavtrudni, I don't know how to pronounce it, who was clad with the very same knowledge as Odin. Legend goes that the Jotni are Thor's most dangerous opponent, and is a major motif in Norse mythology, with the Jotni residing in the Great Mountain area of southern Norway. Now throughout history the folklore has become blurred, with some stories blending Jotni and trolls together into one, but that is simply not the case, with these two legends having very separate histories throughout folklore. And that's the T. In at 3, the Witch's Tree. On 6th Street and Park Ave in Louisville, Kentucky, you will find what can only be described as a natural monstrosity. A knotted tree, so misshapen and tortured that it could easily serve as a portal to hell. Now, even if the tree itself didn't catch your attention, the trinkets, baubles and bead necklaces hanging from the branches certainly would. They are items that have been placed by the Louisville locals to appease the vengeful witches. Now, the legend of the bizarre tree begins in the late 19th century, where it was supposedly the gathering place for a coven of witches, where they would perform their ceremonies. All was well until a city planning committee decided to remove the tree ahead of the annual May Day celebration. This, of course, displeased the witches greatly, so much so that they cast a curse. Exactly 11 months to the day after the tree was cut down, the city suffered a storm so severe It was assumed by locals that the witches had made good on their curse and summoned a storm demon. Now during this horrendous storm, lightning struck the stump of the old witch's tree and suddenly a new tree began to grow. However, it was not a healthy tree but rather twisted and otherworldly. Now whether these stories are true or not, the locals of Louisville believe this tree houses something dark and sinister, and to this day continue to adorn it with baubles and trinkets. In it too, the Headless Woman of Iroquois Park. Iroquois Park is a 739-acre park in Louisville, Kentucky, designed by Frederick Law Cherokee and Shawnee Parks. It is a serene and picturesque park with an old-growth forest and viewpoint atop the hill. However, as you wander through the forest and the winding trails on a warm night, you may begin to hear the sound of a dog barking wildly. Following that, a thick fog will roll in, partially obstructing your vision. Then, you will smell the stench of smoke and fire begin to rise in the air. The fog will break, but just for a moment, and then you'll see a figure begin to approach. Now accounts vary, but some state that a woman will appear dressed in early 1800 settlement clothes, and as she walks through the park, you can see her very clearly holding her head in her hands as blood drips from her severed neck. The legend has been passed down from generation to generation, with each new storyteller making it much more gruesome. For those looking for a thrill, it is said that the Headless Woman is regularly seen close to the lookout point, with some suspecting that she is the ghost of a farmer's wife who settled with her husband in the area where the park is now located. The story goes that one night while her husband was downtown on business, an Indian tribe attempted to sneak up on the homestead and ransack it. The intruders grabbed the woman and beheaded her before promptly setting fire to the home. Now, whether you believe this is that very same woman is up to you, but regardless, there have been far too many accounts of parkgoers seeing the Headless Woman for it to be simply legend. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Pope Lick Monster. The Pope Lick Monster is said to be a part man, part goat, and part sheep creature reported to live beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek in the Fisherville neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, numerous urban legends exist about the creature and its origins, with some accounts claiming that the creature uses hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers onto the trestle in order to kill them. However, other accounts claim that the creature jumps down from the trestle onto the roofs of cars passing beneath it. No matter what the story, the creature is so unsettling to those who see it that they are driven to leap off of the trestle. Its origins vary, but some reports state that the human-goat hybrid was a circus freak who vowed revenge after being mistreated. In another version, the monster escaped from a train that was derailed on the trestle. And the final rumor is that the creature is really the twisted reincarnated form of a farmer who sacrificed goats in exchange for satanic powers. No matter which way you spin it, this creature is horrifying and is said to be behind a number of deaths and accidents at the trestle since its initial construction, despite the now looming 8-foot fence built to keep thrill seekers out.